Welcome back to the deep dive. It's Friday, February 13th, 2026. And looking at the news this week, that date feels a little ominous.
It has.
We are staring down the barrel of a financial juggernaut today.
A $143 billion juggernaut, to be exact.
That is the number, isn't it? Apple just dropped their Q1 2026 results, and, well, record-breaking just doesn't really cover it anymore.
No, not at all. We're talking an installed base of over 2.5 billion active devices now.
2.5 billion, that's what, a third of the entire planet holding a screen made by one company?
It's a number that's genuinely hard to contextualize. I was running the comparisons, and if Apple were a country, just based on these GDP-level revenues, it would be the 8th richest nation on Earth.
8th richest.
Yeah. It's sitting right there between France and Italy. That's the kind of economic power we're talking about.
That is massive. But here's the thing, and this is why we wanted to do this specific deep dive. We're not here to just, marvel at the stock price.
Right.
We want to do something different. We found this incredible visualization on Reddit, a Sankey diagram of their 2025 financials.
Oh, yeah. That thing was amazing. It really visualizes the flow.
It does. You see this massive river of, $416 billion in total revenue at the top. And it filters down through all the costs and taxes and then just trickles into this final pool of $112 billion in pure net income.
And we want to swim upstream.
Exactly. We want to trace that money all the way back, not just to the Apple Store, but to the cobalt mines in the Congo, the factory floors in Shenzhen, and, the strategy meetings in Cupertino.
We're looking at the hidden costs of the iPhone, the financial, the human, and the environmental cost that ties it all together.
From the mine to the margin.
Yep.
So let's start with the money, because looking at that diagram, one thing jumped out at me immediately. The operating margin, it's sitting at roughly 32%.
Which, for a company that makes physical hardware, metal, glass, silicon, is technically almost impossible.
Right, because hardware is supposed to be a low-margin game. You've got atoms, you've got shipping, defects. So how are they pulling that off?
And that brings us to the services narrative. We've been hearing about it for years, but now, in 2026, it is fully realized.
Okay.
Wall Street doesn't really value Apple anymore just on how many iPhones they sell. They value the ecosystem.
Let's unpack that, because I looked at the breakdown, and the difference is it's stark.
It is. So think about it this way. The hardware, the actual phone, has a gross margin of maybe 35 to 40%.
Which is still pretty good.
It's good, but it's not software good. Services, so the App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, those have gross margins of 60 to 70%.
Wow. Because once the software is built, selling one more copy costs basically nothing.
Zero marginal cost. Exactly. And this completely changes how they treat the phone. The iPhone 16 isn't really the product anymore.
It's the Trojan horse.
It's the Trojan horse, which explains why they're pushing the budget phones like the SE so hard in places like India.
Right. They don't need to make a huge profit on the device itself.
Not at all. They just need to get it in your pocket.
Yeah.
Because once you own that screen, you are locked in. You're subscribing to iCloud because your storage is full, you're buying things in games, you're paying for Apple TV plus Heal.
And the data totally backs that up. I saw that in early 2026, App Store spending growth actually accelerated to 7%.
And that's happening while inflation is still a real issue for people.
Yeah.
It just proves the lock-in works. Even if you buy a cheaper phone, you become a valuable subscriber. It's a total shift.
Okay, but speaking of the hardware, we have to talk about the cost of actually building these things. We pulled a teardown report from Digitimes on the iPhone 16.
Right.
The cost to build the Pro Max model, it actually went up a lot.
It did. The bill of materials rose to about $485. That's up, $32 from the last model? Mostly because of the more expensive screens and cameras.
But they didn't really hike the retail price by that much, did they?
No, and that's the whole strategy. They absorbed some of that cost. The hardware margin compressed a little bit from about 62.2% down to 59.5% on that specific model.
Yeah. So they're willing to take a smaller profit on the device.
To make sure you stay in the ecosystem. Because that services tail, that recurring revenue, it subsidizes the hardware.
Okay, so that's the view from Cupertino. Shiny headquarters, high margins, subscriptions flowing in. But let's flip the coin. Let's look at where these things are actually made. Because you can't talk about Apple without talking about Foxconn.
Right. Foxconn is the largest private employer in China, 1.3 million employees.
That's the scale of a small country's army.
It is.
And we have this research paper here by an associate professor, Maggie Tuyen Dong, that talks about the power imbalance I think most people get that Apple has power, but the numbers in here are
That's
just...
breathtaking. So if you break down the value of an iPhone, Apple captures about 58.5% of the value.
Okay.
Do you want to guess how much the Chinese labor, the actual people screwing the phone together, captures?
I'm guessing it's low, but give me the number.
1.8%.
Wait, 1.8%.
It's about $10 of the retail price.
$10 out of $1,000 phone.
$10. And this creates what Professor Dong calls an unhealthy loop. Because Foxconn operates on these razor-thin margins, they are constantly terrified of losing Apple's business.
But hold on. If you're the biggest employer in China, don't you have leverage? Why can't Foxconn just say, pay us more, we walk?
You'd think so. But this is where we get into a concept called asset specificity.
Okay, that sounds like an economics textbook. Break that down.
It basically just means Foxconn has spent billions building factories and buying machines that are specifically designed to build iPhones. They can't just flip a switch and start making, toasters or Samsungs tomorrow. Those are what you call sunk costs.
So if they lose Apple, they're just left with empty buildings and useless machines.
Precisely. They are trapped. And Apple knows this. So Apple can squeeze them on price, and Foxconn, they just have to say yes to survive.
And when Foxconn gets squeezed on price, they have to squeeze their own costs. And the only variable left is
the worker. This is where you get the excessive overtime, the safety violations. We saw this with the food poisoning protests in India a while back, or when Wistron got put on probation.
right.
It's not necessarily that Foxconn wants to be the bad guy. It's that the financial squeeze from the top forces them into a corner where labor is the only thing they can cut.
It sounds like a trap for everyone except the brand at the very top.
It is a trap. The only real leverage they might have is forming some kind of alliance with other suppliers to push back together, but that's incredibly difficult to pull off.
So we have the profit machine at the top, the squeezed manufacturer in the middle. But if we go even further down the chain, we hit the raw materials. And this is where it gets really heavy. We need to talk about the battery, and specifically cobalt.
This is the source of power for every single mobile device we use. And the reality is 60% of the world's cobalt comes from one place.
The Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC.
Exactly. And it's not all big industrial machines digging this stuff up. About 15 to 20% of it is what's called artisanal mining, which sounds, quaint, like artisanal bread.
Right.
But what it really means is people digging by hand, often in just incredibly dangerous conditions.
And the stat that stood out to me from the source material, it was about the children. 12.65% of the mining workforce in these communities is under 18.
It's just, it's heartbreaking. We're talking about hazardous exposure that leads to birth defects, respiratory issues, just the sheer physical toll. There was a comparison in one of our sources that referenced Nelson Mandela, talking about how prison is designed to break the human spirit.
And they were comparing the mines to that.
Yes. That the conditions in these mines do the exact same thing. It dehumanizes people to extract a mineral so we can scroll through social media.
But Apple talks a lot about their supply chain standards. Is any of that actually reaching these mines? I mean, on their website, everything looks very clean.
Well, there are efforts. We looked at case studies like Better Mining and the Mutoshi Cobalt Pilot Project. These are initiatives trying to clean up that artisanal sector.
Okay, so how does that work in practice? Do they just send in inspectors?
It's more physical than that. It's about strict access control. So they put up fences, they have gates, they issue ID cards.
Ah, got it.
If you're under 18, you simply do not get in. They monitor safety equipment, and the data shows in these specific pilot sites, child labor was effectively eliminated.
Okay, so that sounds like a win. Why isn't every mine like that?
Because of the counter-argument. And this is the part that is really difficult. It's the economic reality. To implement these systems, you often have to shut the mine down temporarily to get it all set up. Or by kicking out the kids, you are cutting off a source of income for a family that's already in extreme poverty.
Right. If a family relies on that income to eat and you ban the child from working without replacing that money,
you are solving one problem, but you're creating another one. You might stop child labor, but you might cause starvation. That's the complexity of it all. The long-term safety benefits are undeniable, and the moral case is clear kids should not be in mines.
Of course.
But that transition is just, it's incredibly painful. It requires support for those communities, not just rules.
It really connects back to that unhealthy loop we talked about with Foxconn.
It's all connected.
The pressure for cheap materials and high margins at the top creates these desperate situations at the very bottom.
The $112 billion profit is connected to the $10 assembly cost, which is connected to the artisanal miner in the DRC.
Let's shift gears slightly. We've covered the human cost.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the environmental cost, because Apple markets itself as very green.
Very green.
But when you look at the life cycle assessment, there's a stat that just hits you. 61% of an iPhone's total greenhouse gas emissions happen before I even open the box.
Before you even touch it. That's the extraction and manufacturing. Digging up that cobalt, melting the aluminum, making the glass, and then you have to ship it.
This surprised me. I just assumed most of this stuff came on slow boats.
Not when you need to hit a global release date with millions of units. Apple ships a significant amount of its inventory by air. We're talking Boeing 777s just filled with phones.
Which is way more carbon intensive than a ship.
So much more. But it saves time.
And time is money, especially when you have quarterly earnings to hit.
Precisely. And then we get to the issue of what happens when the phone is out in the world. Planned obsolescence.
Oh, this one gets people fired up. We have the Euro consumers case, right? Regarding the iPhone 6. This was the famous battery gate.
It was. For anyone who doesn't remember, Apple released updates that slowed down older phones.
Right.
They said it was to prevent random shutdowns because the batteries were degrading. Yeah. Consumers said, "You're slowing my phone down to make me buy a new one."
And Italy's regulators agreed, didn't they? They fined them 10 million euros.
They did. For unfair commercial practices. But what's really fascinating here is the consumer behavior side of it. Surveys show that 63% of users replaced their phone just because a new model was released. Not because their old one broke, not because it was slow, just because there was a new one.
We've been trained to want the new shiny thing.
We have.
Yeah.
And that behavior is what drives that 61% manufacturing emission stat. If we all kept our phones for twice as long, we'd cut that impact in half. But the business model, till recently, depended on us buying new hardware every couple of years.
And when we do upgrade, what happens to the old one? I feel like recycling is the magic word everyone uses to feel better about it.
It is the magic word, but the reality is much harder. Rare earth minerals, the stuff mined in the DRC in China, are incredibly difficult and expensive to recycle.
So it's cheaper to just dig up new ones.
It's often cheaper to dig up new ones than to extract them from a dead iPhone. The economics just don't favor it yet. And a lot of people don't even know about Apple's recycling programs. They sell them, or, worst case, they just end up in a drawer or in the trash.
It's a one-way street to a landfill.
Pretty much.
I want to touch on one last piece of this whole ecosystem before we wrap. We've talked about the physical control of the supply chain, but there's also the control of information, the dark side of secrecy.
The Apple Gestapo. This is legendary in Silicon Valley.
That's really what employees call it.
That's the internal nickname for the global security team. These are the people who hunt for leaks. There are stories of them raiding homes looking for lost prototypes, like that famous Gizmodo incident years ago.
It sounds like a spy movie.
It does, but it serves a business purpose,
yeah.
Right? The magic of an Apple keynote depends on surprise. If everyone knows what's coming, the hype dies down. But it creates a culture of fear. We have reports of engineers being fired for tiny infractions. There was one engineer fired just because his daughter filmed a short video of an unreleased iPhone X in the cafeteria.
Wow. Zero tolerance.
Zero tolerance.
Yeah.
And that control extends outwards too. We have to talk about censorship. To keep access to that massive manufacturing base in China and the huge market there, Apple has to comply with local laws.
Which means removing apps.
Exactly. Removing VPNs, removing news apps, removing apps used by protesters in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
It's the trade-off they make to keep the machine running.
So they protect the supply chain at the cost of free expression in those regions.
That's the criticism.
So
yeah.
What does this all mean? We've looked at the money, the mines, the factories, the secrecy. What's the synthesis here?
I think the main takeaway is that the iPhone is a technological marvel. It truly is. But it's also just the tip of an iceberg.
Yep.
And the part of the iceberg we don't see, the underwater part, is this massive, incredibly complex web of financial flows, labor exploitation, and environmental impact.
It's so easy to just see the screen and the apps and forget everything else.
It is. But that device in your pocket connects you to a child in the Congo, a factory worker in Shenzhen, and a data center somewhere burning power. And the sheer scale of it, remember, it's the 8th richest country, means its decisions really do shape the global economy.
It puts that $112 billion profit into a whole new perspective. It's not just a number on a spreadsheet.
No, it represents a massive extraction of value from all over the world.
Yeah.
And here's the question I'm left with. We talked about this pivot to services.
The Trojan horse strategy, yeah.
So if the hardware is just a vessel for subscriptions, does that mean we might stop upgrading every year? If the goal is just to keep me paying for iCloud, maybe I can keep my phone for 5 years. Would that actually alleviate the pressure on the supply chain?
Fewer phones being made means fewer kids and mimes.
You'd hope so. Or does the demand for 2.5 billion active screens mean that the unhealthy loop just keeps spinning forever, regardless of whether we subscribe or not?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
It is.
Something to think about the next time you unlock your phone. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's a lot to process, but we hope you look at your device a little differently today.